Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Virtual Eclipse Community Meetup. I'm your host, Stephanie Swart, and today I'm joined by co-founder of Gitpod and Typefox, Sven Eftinge, who will be showcasing Eclipse Theia, the new platform for developer tools. So without further ado, Sven, take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Okay, so let me share my screen and switch over to slides. What's this button? So if you have questions during the session, you can ask them in the chat or in the Ask a Question thingy down there. And then I'm happy to answer them right away, especially during the demo part, because then it's more in context, so to say. All right, so I'm going to talk about Eclipse Theia, which is a cloud and desktop IDE platform, a new project, open source project at Eclipse. I'm Sven Eftinge, and yeah, I co-founded Typefox and also founded the Theia project together with some of my colleagues 2 years ago. And today I want to explain why we did that, or what is Theia, who's working on that, what does it look like, what it's for, why is it interesting. The first question that might arise now is building a new IDE platform. That sounds like a huge task. That sounds like, okay, if you look at Eclipse, the Eclipse classic IDE, there has been many person years going into developing this, right? With all the smart tool support and so on. So how could we try to re-implement all this stuff, right? Starting even with a smaller team than we are. Now the Theia team is quite diverse and big actually, but we started out with 5 engineers or so. And the reason we did that is because Theia is a new kind of IDE. It is not trying to do the same that classic IDEs like the classic Eclipse IDE or IntelliJ IDE or so do. Instead, it tries to integrate existing tools where possible. So in Eclipse land, we often have the issue that our plugins or language support lag behind the actual version. So for example, C++ has been developing kind of new versions very frequently, and the CDT plugin lagged behind because it's a lot of effort to keep it up to date. So instead of re-implementing half of the frameworks and the languages in Java or the language you use in that IDE, in Theia we try to integrate with existing code from those communities. So there will be less IDE-specific UI in general. You can always build that if you think that's important, and there are parts where it's super important. But then also it comes at a price. So what we do instead often is we embrace terminals and integrate with command line interfaces, and also integrate with existing language support or debug support coming from the different languages and tools. And so this is kind of in between of the classic IDE that has UI for everything and just a text editor and a terminal. And this same scope actually is what Visual Studio Code more or less invented. And they also came up with the idea of language server protocol and the debug adapter protocol that was kind of just, an API or a protocol that they introduced for Visual Studio Code. But I and a couple of other people from the Eclipse community and elsewhere saw the kind of the really kind of the potential in that, and pushed these protocols, help to develop them, make them more widely used in other IDEs. So for instance, I did the first prototype for the Eclipse J integration of the LSP, or we started the LSP for J project at Eclipse. And so push this idea further. And in essence, there is a lot of similarity between the scope of Visual Studio Code and Theia. And actually, we even go one step further and embrace the UX a lot. And so we have this, well, when we develop a feature in Theia, we look at how it's done in different IDEs, of course. But also we especially look at Visual Studio Code because we reuse a lot of tech from there and ideas, and then we do it differently only if we have good reasons. And there are some parts, and I can talk about them later, but in general, there's a strong alignment. So then the next question that comes up is why would you re-implement something that already exists, right? So why do we do Theia if there is Visual Studio Code and we could just use that? And there are 3 reasons. And like there are more reasons, maybe smaller ones, but the 3 I want to present here are really important and deal breakers, so to say. So first, the extensibility. For Theia, we want to have a platform that can be used for all the kind of developer engineering tools that in the Eclipse ecosystem traditionally have been built on the Eclipse platform. So that means you need to be able to do white labeling and really extend a lot of things. That's just not possible with VS Code. I will go into more detail later. Then vendor neutrality, so open source, real open source. That means it is not controlled by one entity, but it is really shared between different vendors, people, community, a diverse community. So when you build your products based on this open source code, your assets are safe and not at risk to be, like if only one vendor, in the case of Visual Studio Code, like Microsoft, and how the future of this foundation you've built on your business on and goes, then yeah, that's maybe not nice to say. And then the third one is desktop and cloud. It was important to have an architecture that allows for both, and that so at the Eclipse Foundation, we have more than one IDE. We have multiple IDEs, and some are cloud IDEs, and then one is a desktop IDE. And in many conversations I made with clients or other people in the community, there was like, yeah, maybe eventually we want to go into cloud, or have it also in the browser, or vice versa. You have a browser thing first, but later you might want to go to the desktop. So we want to support that. So these are the 3 key points that differentiate Theia from VS Code. I want to go into more depth here. With Theia, you can build IDE-like products that is not only mainstream coder tools like an editor, but it also means engineers, smart people who might use other interfaces. In Eclipse, we have, I think we have like different streams there. For instance, we have the very big modeling community that has other syntaxes on top of languages, like visual information and so on. But also there are form-based and so on. That's super important to support that. And then when you build a product, you have to be able to white label it. So that means you should be able to change the styling as it seems fit, and reorder the components, have branding things and so on. We wanted to support that. So the the architecture that Theia is based on is similar to the one from the Spring framework, if you know that, or the Eclipse Xtext framework. That's a framework I've been working on in the past. And they are based on dependency injection, which allows you to really replace very fine-grained bits in an application without the need to fork it or so. So Theia is much more extensible and flexible in that matter than the Eclipse platform is, and of course, even more than what VS Code can do. VS Code has an extension model that is based on the sandbox idea, which makes a lot of sense for other purposes. So if you just want to install some extension that is a little bit of tool support for a certain language or something like that, then running it in a sandbox makes it more secure in the sense that it cannot break the full IDE and so on. I mean, we all, if we are Eclipse users at least, we know that there might be issues with bad plugins harming the UX in general. So this is limited in the VS Code because all the extensions run in a different process, and then they only communicate through a protocol with the main IDE. And so that's quite useful as well. So what we decided in Theia is to have both. We have a native Theia extension possibility, which gives you all the flexibility and so on, everything you need in order to build your IDE-like white label products. But then also we support VS Code extensions as is. So there is like a marketplace with over 10,000 VS Code extensions. Most of them are open source. And so all these extensions are, most of them are available on GitHub. And so you can just get them and install them in any Theia application. So I have to put off my headphones and turn off them because the battery is low, and I hope the audio doesn't get lost now. So can you still hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Good. Okay. So that's for the extensibility. And then the next very important thing is the vendor-neutral open source. So VS Code is open source. Part of it is open source. But then there is a product called Visual Studio Code, which is what most people download and use, and that is not open source. And only that one is able, for instance, to connect to the marketplace and use all the extensions I've just mentioned. If you just use the open source version, the license of the marketplace doesn't allow you to use that for the extensions there, for instance. It's a bit complicated, but there are limitations here. And then together with the thing that it's not under an open source foundation like the Eclipse Foundation, if you build want to base a business on that, then of course you are living on the goodwill of Microsoft, that they don't make decisions that that are harmful to your scope and product. In contrast with Theia, it's at the Eclipse Foundation, so it's already a diverse community, and you can engage with it. And so if you contribute and help, then you also have a say in where it goes and so on. So you have much more possibilities here to secure your assets that you build on top of the open source platform. And the third thing is, we wanted to have something that runs on desktop and cloud. So you should be able to build a modern desktop IDE with Theia. That was one part. But at the same time, also being able to build a cloud IDE similar to Eclipse J or Eclipse Orion. And then the third thing, most importantly, is you should be able to do both with a single source. And I already mentioned that. So that's what I saw a lot, and I still see when people start using Theia,
and I ask them, well, are you doing a desktop IDE or a cloud IDE? Most of them do only one of those at first, and it's really 50-50, I would say. 50% doing desktop IDEs, the other doing cloud IDEs first, but they all have one thing in common. They say later they might do the other thing as well. And so that's a really big important point here. You don't have to decide up front. All right, so then I want to talk about why cloud, because a lot of people, and especially engineers, are a bit hesitant with that idea. And one thing that is for sure not important here is that an IDE runs in the browser just because you can, or when you talk about online IDEs or cloud IDEs, the term only transport that it runs in the browser, but that's not really the point. The point is that an IDE is an interface to a development environment, and development environments are complex beasts, especially nowadays with a lot of microservice architecture, different languages, lots of configuration, and so on. So we are already automating, all the developer tool chain. It's called DevOps or whatever you call it, but we have continuous integration, we have continuous deployment, and we describe how to deploy our applications onto multiple servers. We describe that in code. But still, when it comes to development environments, we are back to, okay, I download Eclipse and then I install something on and so we massage our machine to be a dev environment for that particular project at that particular time, so to say, because projects also change over time. And yeah, that has a lot of issues. It's tedious setting it up, maintaining that, cleaning it up. It has these works on my machine scenarios, all that stuff, right? So we have around Theia at Typefox, we have built a tool called Github that we use to develop Theia actually, and this is what I wanted, how I want to demo Theia today. So instead of doing all this stuff manually, we want to provide a dev environment that is just ready to code. So for any project, right? That's the idea. And the definition of ready to code is the dev environment is set up and working. That means you have installed all and then you have a proper Git state. That means that obviously the Git repository is cloned, but also it's synced with the remotes, and it has checked out the right branch that you need for the task you want to do. Next up, before you can code, you need to have all the dependencies downloaded and verified. And of course, you want to run the build and have the test screen so you're sure if the tests fail after you change, you know it's your change. It's not something that came from the history, right? And then also when you start coding, you typically start certain tasks, and so you can describe that as well. So what we do with Github is you describe all the stuff, and then it's prepared on servers, and then you go to a website or to your ticket system or whatever context you have in your DevOps tool chain and start, okay, I want to code, I want to fix this issue, I want to do this code review, and so on. And I give you a demo now of Theia using that Github technology. So what I have here is a GitHub project. It's a Spring pet clinic, very popular project, I think. And so there is one issue here that I created earlier today. And that is make first name optional. So I will later explain what that issue is about, but what I want to do now is I want to show, like, I can start a Theia based dev environment by just clicking this button here. So what it actually does is, this button, you probably don't have it, you get that once you install the browser extension, you can do that. If you don't have that, you can go to any GitHub project and just prefix the URL with git.io hash. And that will do the same thing. So this is all the button does, is it prefixes your URL. So I did that now for an issue. So the application knows, okay, you probably want to solve this issue. All right, so it sets me into this development mode with a ready to code dev environment. And it seems like the meeting app is a bit busy and slows down the machine. Okay, but it still works. Great. So so this is Theia, what you see. Like this is the IDE, right? And this is really much like this is how we use it in Gitpod, but we haven't branded it a lot. Like the difference is maybe the logo here and my avatar here, but the rest is really like stock Theia, and it is a version from yesterday or Monday or so. And so you see different views here. I want to start with a brief layout before we look into the actual application. So in Theia, we have side panels, and we can go through them, and there are so-called widgets in every side panel. This is the Explorer. We have the same side panel on the right-hand side. So here we see a preview, we have an outline view and a GitHub view. I can also collapse these. And then I have a bottom panel, which I also can collapse here. And there is, for instance, a terminal. And then we have in the main area, we have the editor. Right, so here, this is the terminal. And I can maximize that, and you see there is a task running already that is kind of started the Spring Boot application. And then here you see this log output. And this is coming from Gitpod, because the stuff you see before this output here, that actually didn't run now. It ran when someone last time pushed to the master branch. We are looking now at the master branch. And so that's what we call a pre-build. And so downloading the internet here in this case takes 4 minutes. And so we just shave off these 4 minutes for every task that you would work on. Okay, so that's a terminal. You can open any number of terminals here as you wish. Let's have a look at the application. So I have a preview window here. I could also click here and open it in a new tab. Keep it like that. And so this is a pet store, an example application where I have pet owners. And then a pet owner has pets, right? So, and the issue we wanted to solve is that when you edit an owner, you should be able to leave out the first name. That's currently not possible. Okay, so what we can do now is I open the file. I already know it's person that I have to change the entity person. So here you see this is a Java editor, and we have full language support. For instance, it warns me already here about the serializable. There should be a generated serial version ID. I don't think that's a good idea, so I don't do that. I live with that warning. But I see already what I have to do here in order to make it work is I have to remove the not empty bit here. But that's not enough, because I have seen in the overview here, it prints the first name. I want to handle that also gracefully. So I open the owner details. And so this is the view I see here. And you see it concatenates first name and last name, and that is not so good. I want to change it to full name, and then introduce here new property. And that should say first name is null for. So I already did that before, and I figured out it is an empty string. So that's why I do it like that. As first name and last name. Okay, I think that makes sense. So I kill this process, and in order to make sure it really works, we want to debug the application. So here you see the debug view, and there are launch configs. I can also open them. They are just written down in JSON, checked into your repository. So everyone in your team has these launch configs, and you share them, of course. I start a debug session, and it starts up, and then eventually I can reload this. No, I'm too early, I guess. Yeah. Okay. So now let's try. Maybe we can remove this. Right, that works now. And now we want to also make sure that this code hits. So in this case, it should hit this breakpoint. And it does. So now it hits this breakpoint. I can hover, for instance, here, and I see the value of last name. And that's the string. I can also hover over this, and I see the full object. On the left, I see all the threads. I could also pause other threads. And then for the thread, I see the call stack. I could go and see also the other code here. And then if I go back to this, I see the local variable. And also here, there is the debug console where you see all the output. And I get auto-completion in order to test stuff. Like I can also say get full name, for instance. And then you see the output is Davis here. So I go through that, and then and you see it never hits this. So it seems to work. What I could do instead, and probably I should and I would, is write a test. So there are tests here as well. And let me close this so you have a bit more screen escape. So this is the owner controller test, right? And so what I want to do now is I want to install an extension that allows me to easily run them. What I do is I type in marketplace and go to the VS Code marketplace and just search here for Java test, for instance. And I see there are many different extensions. I could go into more detail and look at them. But this is the one I want to install. So I could theoretically download the extension here directly, but the terms of the marketplace don't allow me to install these downloads into anything else than a Visual Studio Code product. So I'm not doing that because that would be illegal. So I go to the GitHub project instead. Here there are releases, and they have the same bits here. So you can download it from here. That's fine. It's MIT license, so you should check also the license before you do that. And then I have this view here, the extension view. I just drag and drop the extension to it. It gets uploaded here, installed. And now, oh yeah, it says I should reload because it has an extension to a Java language server. So I reload, remove this. Yeah, so my machine is fanning all the time, and that is quite unusual. I think it is the meeting app that I use in run Firefox. All right, so it now initializes and launches a new, like all the extensions I had before, but now if I look here, there's also a new Java test runner extension. And I see here, there is the test view here, and it's not fully initialized yet. So, well, that's demo effect here. So what I wanted to see is, I want to see them actually. So what I will do now is just reload once more. Sorry, there seems to be a bug. I take a note. So the point I want to make here is just, yeah, there are a lot of extensions you can install, but it's not allowed to directly download them from the marketplace, but you can find them on GitHub, and you can even also build them yourself from source. And there are also plans to start working on an extension registry and host that at Eclipse. So this will not be an issue in the future anymore. Okay. Okay, now it works. So now you see here we have the so-called code lenses. So that's actions that are inlined in the editor. And in order to check whether my change works, I could write a new test, and then I, for instance, could put a breakpoint, assuming that is a new test, and then I click debug test, and it runs that test, and then I can just debug it very conveniently, so to say.
So Sven, there's just a quick comment. It says this may be covered soon, but in case it is not, for the Java support, what parts of the Eclipse IDE were reused? JDT Core, Java Platform, Debug, refactoring support, JUnit, etc., via LSP or other channel in Theia?
Excellent question. So the language support you see here is actually Eclipse JDT for the most part. So that is, we run the Java extension for VS Code that has been initiated and developed by Red Hat. It wraps the JDT language server, and then it also has extension points for other extensions to hook in. So the unit testing here, for instance, is an extension to the Java language server, which actually is Equinox application. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff we can reuse from the Eclipse ecosystem. Very good question. Okay, so let's stop this. I think I'm fine with my change now. So I want to commit my changes. And so I go to the SCM view, which means source control, but it's usually Git. You can install other source control providers, of course. And then I see, okay, I have 3 files have changes. I double click on them, and I see on the right a dev editor. And now you can see that I use my cursors, right and left cursors, in order to go through all the changes, so I can go through them. So the first one is the Gitpod YAML. That is kind of part of the description for my dev environment. I don't want to go into a lot of depth here, but you say here like there are support and what should happen once this port is kind of served. Now that's why we see the web application on the right. And then we have init task, that is what is executed during the pre-build. And then the command that is executed on start. And we have a new section here that was added because we uploaded a VS Code extension. So we uploaded the bit and it got stored in the system. And now we have this information. If I would commit this now, everyone who uses, like starts a new workspace after this commit will also have the VS Code Java test extension in it. The other changes are, yeah, the full name, and then of course this detail, so I can stage everything, say optional first name, for instance, so that's my message. I committed. So now this is my head commit. I can see that. I could even amend it again, and so that's a real cool UI for amending commits here. Then I can push the change. So there are, like, this is a button that would push my branch. But also, if I go to the GitHub integration view, it says here the current branch GH1 has no upstream branch. So GH1 is the branch name because the GitHub issue is the issue number 1. So I publish this change. It would ask me once more because I published an upstream to the upstream repository. It does that, and now it fetches kind of the new information, and now it understands that, okay, I am on this branch, and maybe I want to create a pull request against master, so it proposes this for me here, and I can just create a pull request. So the pull request is created. Let's go to it. So that's my pull request I just made, and then, like, one thing I could do is, you know, as a reviewer, like, I usually don't review my own PRs, but just imagine this, I would be a different person. I could go here and again do git.io hash before that, or just click this check integration here, and then I get another dev environment. It's a one, and I can use that to do the code review. So the code reviews would not be only based on a diff, but I can really run the code, try it out, and do things with that. So what you see here now is, it tells me there is a pre-build running at the moment. Usually this work is more async. So someone creates a PR, and then after half an hour or so, someone goes and does a code review. In this case, I mean, I did it immediately, and I don't want to wait, so I skipped the pre-build. I don't want to wait for it. And then so I get another dev environment. That's an important part I want to explain here. So this is just for every task, I have a new disposable dev environment. I just, you know, create, I think I create 20, 30, 40 such workspaces per day, dev environments per day. And I just use them and forget about them. And that's really changing how you work with the cloud IDE. If you do it like that, then it becomes more like it better integrates with the rest of the DevOps tool chain. Like, it's all, you know, everyone can go at any point to that and get started with it. It's more like a serverless thing. It has less state associated to it because we always run the full configuration, and there's no surprise, no state that has been mutated over time and so on. So this IDE opens now in code review mode, so it opens the changes here, and then I can go through that, and I can even also say, I don't know, like do comments here, and so add a single comment, and when I'm done, I could do, I could do a code review from here, approve it or something. Because I'm the same user, I cannot really do that here now, but in general I could do, or merge it. And then that stuff, of course, gets here, so you see my comment I just made. Okay. So let me go back to slides. All right, so there was also a lot about Gitpod now, because I think that's it's pretty cool for one, but it's also important to understand what makes the cloud IDE so interesting. It is definitely not the thing that it runs in the browser. I would say that's a disadvantage. I mean, it allows us to provision IDEs quickly because everyone has a browser, but there are drawbacks to that. But it's really kind of the getting a dev environment where you can start being creative and productive. That's the important bit. So Gitpod is a hosting solution for Theia. There is an online SaaS version for it, and then also a self-hosted version will be released in a couple of weeks. And both versions will allow you eventually, we hope also in kind of 2 months or so, to run your own Theia applications. So currently you get always kind of the Gitpod curated Theia application, but you can install VS Code extensions. In future, you will be able to run your own products in self-hosted from the get-go in SaaS, and that will also be possible. And then one important or interesting thing here is that we, of course, use Theia and Gitpod to develop Theia and Gitpod. And so the Theia open source repository is configured in a similar way than the Spring pack cleaning I just showed you, which has a very very good effect, actually. So what we see in Theia is that even though the project is still relatively young and we haven't written a lot of documentation and the website is, let's say, small and simple, we get pull requests and contributions from many different people, different companies, and so on. And then almost every other day, we wake up to really good, high-quality pull requests from people we haven't seen before online. And so this is only last month, and you see we have 34 different authors committing stuff to the project. And so that's really like this this instant dev environment thing. It lowers the barrier for contributing to open source projects, obviously, right? And not only open source, but here you can really see the impact. In general, Theia is a very diverse project. So last 3 months, this is a graphic from Ericsson and from Eclipse. You see that like there are 3 companies that do a lot of work, but then there is this green bit, which is contributors. It means individuals or people working with companies or for companies that are not Eclipse members or not registered as is, and so on. So these are this is a very diverse part. And then there are a lot of adopters, like bigger enterprises and companies that use Theia. I want to go through them briefly. There's Ericsson. Ericsson actually founded the project together with us. And they do it because they want to have a long-term kind of a replacement for the classic Eclipse IDE. Red Hat have been contributing a lot to Theia and still do so, and they are using it in Eclipse Che and also in OpenShift.io. IBM used Theia in 2 products, if I'm not mistaken. I think at least 2 products, and also in open source projects like CodeWin. Google uses Theia in Google Cloud. So if you are a Google Cloud user and you go into your console, then you get a Theia in order to, the terminal is not Theia, but the editor and so on is Theia. ARM are replacing or have been replacing their Embed Studio IDE based on Theia. SAP are in the process of replacing the SAP Web IDE with Theia. And then, we help a lot of other companies building products based on Theia. And so most of them we cannot really talk about because that's our internal private project and so on, but there are some really big names. Some of them will be revealed also in the future. So one very interesting one will be revealed mid-October. I'm looking forward to that. Right, so then last slide is Theia 1.0. Currently we have 0.11 or so, I think. We want to complete the VS Code extension support. So the surface for the VS Code API is quite huge, and Theia supports most of it already, but there are some rough edges, I would say. So the theming is not fully supported. We have some issues with the web views here and there, and then also keeping up with the changes in the API is something we need to do. But in general, it works quite well already, but there are some things that need to be polished. In documentation, there is very little documentation at the moment, as I said. So most of these contributors, and we get a lot, surprisingly, all read the code and get along with that more or less. But of course, we want to improve the onboarding for the Theia 1.0 release and write documentation for adopters and developers, but also for users. And then we need to define what is API and what is not, and also define the contracts around that and the life cycles, and that's part of the process. And I think that's the most important bits, and we want to release it around winter, so this winter. All right, so that is my last slide. I want to say thank you. Go to Theia IDE or the GitHub repository, which now these days, in the next couple of days, we will move to an Eclipse organization. So that repository will be github.com Eclipse Theia/Theia. And then if you go there's chats and so on and issues, and you can just engage with the community. We are all very happy to see new people there, and we are generally friendly and helpful. If you need professional help, of course, you can reach out to us, Typefox IOs, doing trainings and services, and for a decent hosting solution, you should check out Github. And in general, you can send DMs over Twitter to me or figure out my email. Okay, thank you. If you have some questions, I think.
Sure. So it looks like we have 2 questions. So the first one is, are there examples, Hello World, for writing extensions and plugins?
Very small, there are. And there is also even a command line wizard. But that's the point, right? There is definitely a need for better documentation and better onboarding, for sure.
And then our last question is, how easy is it to carry over DSLs created with technologies originally developed for the Eclipse workbench, such as Xtext or Sirius?
Xtext or Sirius, okay. So for Xtext, it is very easy because one of the first things we did when we discovered the language server protocol was implementing support for it for Xtext. So you can wrap your Xtext language in a language server protocol and then hook it up in a Theia extension, native Theia extension or VS Code extension. For Sirius, there is no direct support. What we've done is that we've developed a graphical diagramming framework based on web technology that's called Sprotty. That works very nicely with Xtext. So if you have an Xtext-based DSL and you want to have diagrams and so on top of that, you can use Sprotty and hook that up in a Theia extension. There are really good examples for that. Just Google for that, but you should be able to find it.
Great. So it looks like that's all the questions we have for today. So thank you, Sven, for the great presentation and the awesome demo. If anybody has any other questions, we'll be uploading this link to YouTube. So feel free to drop questions in the chat and we'll send them right over to Sven. So with that, again, I want to say great presentation and thanks so much for coming out, and to you, the community who has joined us and asked questions on this live stream today.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for having me. Bye-bye.